Oh, okay, that's brilliant. So we are recording. So, very warm welcome, everyone, to the first webinar this year, the first webinar in our new series, this is now our fifth series of webinars. And the theme for this year's series of webinars is acquired deafblindness, the stories we tell. And so throughout this series, I'm looking forward certainly to hearing some of the stories and the way in which the stories we tell about deaf blindness, particularly acquired deaf blindness, inform the way we think about acquired deaf blindness in our lives, in our practice, with our families, and with our friends. So I think most people probably know me, but if not, I'm Pete Simcock. I'm chair of the Acquired Deaf Blindness Network. So I'm the one that sends you lots of emails about all the things that are going on. And it's always lovely for me to attend these events where I get to put faces to names and that you get to see each other as well as members of the network. And I can see that I'm joined by co-chair Femke Kruijger from the Netherlands, who is joining us today as well. Now, before we continue with the webinar, I relatively recently announced that our other co-chair, Liz Duncan, has decided to step down from her role as co-chair and essentially enjoy a very well-deserved retirement. But many of you will know Liz personally, or you will have known through her work that she's made a huge contribution not only to the Acquired Deaf Blindness Network, but to the field of acquired deaf blindness more widely, and perhaps more wildly as well as widely. But I would like just to say a huge thanks now to Liz for all that she has done for the field and for the Acquired Deaf Blindness Network. So what happens now? Well, Femke and I are making arrangements for some interim support to support us in our work in the committee. And then later this year, I will be in contact with all members about the ADBN committee, with opportunities for people to apply to be the chair, two co-chairs, and somebody to take on a social media role. Voting will then take place as to who wants to take on those roles, and the new committee will be announced before the Deafblind International and World Federation of the Deafblind Conference. And at that conference, it's from then on that the new committee will take on the role of running the Acquired Deaf Blindness Network. So that's enough from general news. Let's turn to today's webinar. As always, I will ask when we start, if you could turn off your cameras and microphones when we begin. It just helps with bandwidth and things like that and enables us to really concentrate on our presenter. We are being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel as soon as possible. And so your presence here is your consent to that recording. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then please do feel free to leave. Koula, our speaker today, will present for around 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have a time for questions. And as always, if you have a question, you can either put that in the chat and we will read that out, or you can sign or speak your question. And if that's the case, please just raise your hand on Zoom and we will invite you to turn off your mic, to put your camera on and ask your question. But please, can I remind people to identify themselves and their location before they ask their question? So, for example, simply saying, it's Peter from the UK speaking, and my question is, and off you go. And that really helps us understand who is who and who is asking the questions. Now, you will note we are very, very fortunate today to have support of interpreters. We have Marina, who is interpreting Greek and or English spoken language into Greek Sign Language for our presenter. When Koula is presenting, she will present in Greek Sign Language, and Marina will be interpreting that into Greek spoken language, and Yanis will be interpreting the Greek spoken language into English language. As such, please do allow time for our presenters to work through those communication chains just so that we can all take part. I imagine because we're all in this field, we're very used to creative ways and communication chains, but it really helps ensure that people can follow what's going on and take part. So let me now turn to introduce our speaker. This is our first speaker from Greece, so we're really excited that Koula has agreed to join us. Koula Somaraki is a Greek deaf traveller and author living with Usher Syndrome. Together with her husband Marcus, she has travelled to more than 90 countries around the world, often independently and on a low budget. She is the author of the autobiographical book, The Life of an Active and Courageous Deaf Woman, in which she describes her life, challenges, and experiences as a deafblind traveller. Through her talks and her writing, she aims to inspire people with disabilities to travel, to live independently, and to believe in their abilities. So, Koula, huge thanks for joining us this afternoon, this evening, and I'm delighted to hand over to you for your presentation.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους σας. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση. Όταν πήρα την πρόσκληση σκέφτηκα ότι ναι, θα ήταν σημαντικό να σας μιλήσω για τη ζωή μου. Εγώ είμαι η Κούλα Σομαράκη, είμαι από την Ελλάδα. Έχω γεννηθεί στην Κρήτη και μεγάλωσα εκεί στο νησί της Κρήτης και τώρα έχω έρθει εδώ και μένω στην Αθήνα τα τελευταία χρόνια. Όσον αφορά τη δουλειά μου, είμαι δασκάλα και δουλεύω σε σχολείο με παιδιά με αυτισμό. Έχω γράψει και αυτό το βιβλίο που είναι «Η ζωή μιας θαραλέας και γενναίας κουφής» και ετοιμάζω και δεύτερο βιβλίο αυτή τη στιγμή για παγκόσμια ταξίδια που έχω κάνει σε πολλές χώρες. Το δεύτερο ακόμα δεν
Can I
έχω. Και αν
interrupt?
ήθελα να ρωτήσω πώς θες να το
Ναι.
κάνουμε.
Σε δώσεις, αν είναι εύκολο. Welcome everybody. Many thanks for the invitation. When I got that invite and they asked to speak about my life, I think that was quite important. My name is Koula Somaraki. I was born in Crete, in the island of Crete, and I was raised there. And the last few years, I'm working in Athens, and I'm living in Athens. I work as a teacher in schools with children who have autism. And the book I'm going to present to you today, it's my first one. And at the moment, I'm preparing a second one with some trips I did abroad.
The second book, she has already written it. She just tells me. Sorry.
Good, good.
Εγώ γεννήθηκα στην Κρήτη, όπως σας είπα λοιπόν, και από μωρό εκεί πέρα οι γονείς μου δεν ήξεραν ότι είμαι κοφή. Μόλις με είδανε, ούτε ότι είμαι τυφλοκοφή, φυσικά δεν ήξεραν ούτε για το σύνδρομο Άσερ, μέχρι που έφτασα 2 χρονών και εκεί η μαμά μου κατάλαβε ότι φώναζε το όνομά μου, εγώ δεν γυρνούσα, νόμιζε στην αρχή ότι διαφορούσα κάθε φορά που φώναζε. Μετά άρχισε να σκέφτεται, περίπου 2 χρονών, με πήγε σε κάποιον ειδικό και είπε ότι σίγουρα δεν ακούει. Δεν είναι ότι... Όχι, έλεγε η μαμά μου, αποκλείεται να μην ακούει, αφού πολλές φορές με βλέπει και καταλαβαίνει τι λέω. Και τότε με πήγαν στο γιατρό, έκαναν αναλυτικές εξετάσεις και είδαν ότι με κοφή και όλοι στην οικογένεια στεναχωρέθηκαν πάρα πολύ. Τι θα γίνει στο μέλλον, πώς θα μεγαλώσει στη ζωή της, ήταν όλοι πολύ αναστατωμένοι. Ξέχασα να σας πω ότι πριν γεννηθώ, αυτό που έφτεξε και γεννήθηκα κοφή ήταν ότι την ώρα της γέννας ο γιατρός με τράβηξε πολύ απότομα και σε κάποια σημεία στο λαιμό, έτσι όπως με τράβηξε, δημιουργήθηκε κάποια βλάβη και έτσι προκλήθηκε η κόφωση.
Good. So, as I said before, I was born in the island of Crete. When I was a little baby, and first of all, I was born deaf. But when I was a little baby, my parents didn't know about my deafness. Apparently, also, they didn't know about Usher syndrome and deafblindness in general. I was diagnosed around when I was 2 years old. My mother was talking to me, and I was looking as an ignorant person. So my mother, we went together with my mother to the doctor when I was 2, and specialist did some exams and some assessments, and they diagnosed me as a deaf person. Originally, my parents didn't believe them, but eventually after they got very sad about it and very worried about my future, they started accepting it. The reason I got deaf is during my birth, there were some implications due to the way the doctor treated the birth. Thus, I was born deaf.
Έτσι λοιπόν άρχισαν να ρωτάνε παντού τι θα γίνει, πώς θα γίνει με το μέλλον μου, αν θα μπορέσω να σπουδάσω, αν θα μπορέσω να πάω στο σχολείο. Όλα τα σχολεία ήταν μακριά από το χωριό που μέναμε. Αλλά μου είπαν μετά ότι δεν πειράζει, υπάρχει οικοτροφείο εκεί και θα μπορέσω να πάω 4-5 χρονών, θα έπρεπε να με πάρουν και να με αφήσουν στην Κρήτη. Μιλάμε για την Κρήτη, στα Χανιά. Εμένα ήταν στην Ιράπετρα το χωριό μου και θα έπρεπε να ταξιδέψω 5 ώρες μέχρι τα Χανιά, εκεί βρισκόταν το οικοτροφείο. Στην ηλικία των 4-5 χρονών να ξεκινήσω εκεί να μάθω νοηματική, να μάθω τη γλώσσα. Φυσικά στεναχωρέθηκαν πάρα πολύ με αυτή την έκβαση. Κλαίγανε κάθε φορά που με πήγαιναν γιατί ήταν πολύ μακρινή η απόσταση και μεγάλη. Και έτσι ξεκίνησα εγώ, έβλεπα την οικογένειά μου, τους έβλεπα μόνο Χριστούγεννα, Πάσχα, καλοκαίρι και στις διακοπές. Και έτσι ξεκίνησα, έμαθα να γράφω, δεν ήξερα νοηματική φυσικά, εκεί ξεκίνησα να μαθαίνω, ούτε οι γονείς μου ξέρανε και πώς θα μπορούσαμε να επικοινωνήσουμε με τους γονείς μου. Και χρησιμοποιούσαμε έναν άλλο κώδικα που δεν ήταν ακριβώς νοηματική, δεν ήταν ελληνική νοηματική γλώσσα, ήταν ένας κώδικας οικογενειακός για να επικοινωνούμε μεταξύ μας. Ήταν δύσκολα αυτά τα χρόνια. Και μετά κατάλαβαν ότι υπάρχει ελληνική νοηματική γλώσσα.
So, I'm keeping notes so I
Ότι
can
από την
be able to
Ιερόπετρα
translate.
πήγε στα Χανιά.
Yeah. So, after diagnosis, when I was 2, my family started asking around how the future will be, what will happen, etc., etc. Will I be able to go at school, to attend a school? I was born in a little village, a small town actually, to the eastern side of Crete, and most of the schools were quite far from there. But there was some sort of a special school to the other side of the island, to the western part, close to the town of Chania. But that school was almost 5 hours away by car. and it was the only place that I would be able to learn Greek Sign Language. So it was a very sad period. Everybody in my family were quite upset, and they were even crying when I was going there because I had to move there permanently at the age of 5. And I was visiting my family's small town to the other side of the island only for Christmas, Easter, and during summer holidays. In that school, I managed to learn how to write, and also I managed to learn Greek Sign Language. But my family was ignorant. They didn't know how to speak Greek Sign Language. So uh, uh, um, we developed a code of communication only within the family to communicate. But it wasn't the Greek Sign Language.
Από εκεί λοιπόν μεγαλώνοντας πήγα μέχρι το δημοτικό, μέχρι 14 χρονών έφτασα. Μετά οι γονείς μου αποφάσισαν ότι θέλουν και αυτοί να μάθουν ελληνική νοηματική γλώσσα για να μπορούν να επικοινωνούν πιο άνετα μαζί μου. Και έτσι πήγαν οι γονείς μου, πήγαιναν μία φορά τη βδομάδα εκεί στην πόλη των Χανιών, μάθαιναν νοηματική, τα βασικά νοήματα έτσι ώστε να μπορούμε να επικοινωνούμε καλύτερα. Εγώ φυσικά μεγαλώνοντας έβλεπα καθαρά. Μου άρεσε πολύ να κάνω ποδήλατο, μου άρεσε πολύ να κάνω βόλτες, να πηγαίνω στα βουνά, είχα πολλά ενδιαφέροντα. Και περίπου από τα 12, μεταξύ 12 και 14, δεν θυμάμαι ακριβώς, ένα βράδυ που έκανα ποδήλατο, τρόμαξα ξαφνικά. Νόμιζα ότι είχα κάποιο πρόβλημα με την καρδιά μου, νόμιζα ότι φοβήθηκα, σαν να ένιωσα ένα τράνταγμα, σαν να έχασα την ισορροπία μου. Και δεν κατάλαβα ακριβώς τι έγινε. Και μια άλλη μέρα πάλι που ήμουνα μαζί με τη μαμά μου και ήταν πάλι βράδυ και περπατούσα μαζί με τη μαμά μου, αντί να πηγαίνω ευθεία, πήγαινα δεξιά-αριστερά, έχανα την ισορροπία μου δηλαδή. Και λέω καλά, ενώ πριν ήμουνα μια χαρά, τώρα γιατί πηγαίνω τρικλίζω σαν μεθυσμένη. Και εκείνη τη μέρα, μαζί με τη μαμά, πήγαμε στο γιατρό για να μου κάνει εξέταση στα μάτια.
Um, so I was living there until the age of 14. I went to the elementary school and then to junior high school. And also around that age, my parents decided to start learning the basics of the Greek Sign Language. And they were visiting my town to the western part of Crete, Chania, once a week. So they learned the Greek Sign Language, and we started communicating with it. As I was
Sorry,
growing up,
στο Ηράκλειο πήγαινα να μάθουν, όχι στα Χανιά.
okay. Apologies.
My mistake.
They learned Greek Sign Language to another school, but still in Crete, to the biggest city of Crete, Heraklion. So eventually they started communicating all together. So apart from that, Kula, as she was growing up, she had a clear vision. She was riding the bike. She was hiking. She had a lot of activities. But close to the age of 12 to 14, she remembers an incident during the night that she was riding the bike and she got scared out of the blue without understanding why. In a way, she lost her balance, and close to that time, another incident took place. It was again during the night. She was with her mother, and she started having vestibular issues, going either left or right, but not straight, like she was a drunken person. So they visited an eye doctor.
Έτσι, ο γιατρός μου έδωσε γυαλιά. Στην πραγματικότητα τα γυαλιά δεν με βοήθησαν, γιατί το σύνδρομο Άσερ που είχα και επηρεάζει την περιφερειακή όραση, δεν το βοηθάνε κάπως τα γυαλιά. Αυτό που βοηθάει είναι να έχεις κάποιον συνοδό, αλλά τότε πριν 30 χρόνια δεν ήξερε κανείς, δεν υπήρχε ενημέρωση σχετική με το σύνδρομο Άσερ. Ιδίως εδώ στην Ελλάδα δεν υπήρχε τίποτα σχετικό. Και έτσι όταν τελείωσα το δημοτικό, πήγα στο γυμνάσιο και στο λύκειο, επειδή στην Κρήτη δεν υπήρχε, πήγα στην Αθήνα αναγκαστικά. Αναγκάστηκα να μετακομίσω στην Αθήνα για να πάω στο γυμνάσιο και στο λύκειο και να μείνω εκεί σε οικοτροφείο. Και από εκεί ξεκίνησα να μειώνεται κι άλλο η όρασή μου. Τα παιδιά, οι φίλοι μου με φώναζαν, κουνούσαν τα χέρια τους γύρω μου και εγώ καταλάβαινα ότι δεν έχω καλή περιφερειακή όραση, δεν βλέπω περιφερειακά. Και έτσι παραδέχτηκα για πρώτη φορά ότι όντως υπάρχει πρόβλημα και με τα μάτια μου. Αλλά οι άλλοι δεν μπορούσαν να καταλάβουν ακριβώς τι συμβαίνει, ούτε υπήρχε η λέξη σύνδρομο Άσερ, όλοι αυτοί οι ορισμοί που υπάρχουν τώρα. Υπήρχε τεράστια έλλειψη στην ενημέρωση.
So that eye doctor prescribed glasses, which apparently these glasses didn't help because Usher syndrome affects primarily the peripheral vision. So these sort of glasses aren't really helpful. Usually with Usher syndrome, you need some sort of navigator or an assistant. But at that time, and we are talking about 30 years ago, no one was aware about deafblindness or Usher syndrome. So, after the elementary school, I attended the junior high and high school, but because Crete, the island of Crete, didn't have this kind of schools for the deaf, I was forced to move to the capital of Greece, to Athens. So I attended there junior high and high school. Around that time, while I was a student, my vision started to deteriorate. A lot of friends were signing towards me or talking to me, but because of the loss of my peripheral vision, I couldn't see them. And no one knew why that is happening because Usher syndrome wasn't really that not famous, but in a way it wasn't easy to diagnose.
Υπήρχαν ένας, δύο, τρεις κοφοί με παρόμοιο πρόβλημα που δεν βλέπανε περιφερειακά, αλλά δεν είχαν κάνει κάποια σύνδεση ότι αυτό είναι ένα συγκεκριμένο σύνδρομο με αυτό το όνομα. Ένας τυφλοκοφός έτυχε και πήγε στο Λονδίνο πρώτη φορά να εξεταστεί και τότε έμαθε τη λέξη Άσερ, τη λέξη σύνδρομο Άσερ. Και τότε γύρισε πίσω στην Ελλάδα και είπε αυτό είναι, μας έφερε φυλάδια από το Λονδίνο που πήγε και τα έφερε στην Ελλάδα. Τότε ήταν η πρώτη φορά που χαρήκαμε όλοι που υπήρχε αυτή η ενημέρωση και αυτή η πληροφόρηση και καταλάβαμε ότι ναι, αυτό είναι που έχουμε, ότι το βράδυ δεν μπορούμε να δούμε καλά, δηλαδή διάβαζα μέσα εκεί πολλά συμπτώματα τα οποία είχα κι εγώ. Είδα τη λέξη σύνδρομο, Άσερ και είδα όλα αυτά τα συμπτώματα που είχα κι εγώ και τότε κατάλαβα ότι αυτό είναι από αυτά τα φυλάδια που μας έφερε ο κοφός που πήγε στο Λονδίνο. Πήγε στα σωματεία, μίλησε γι' αυτό, έκανε ομιλίες, ενημέρωσε τον κόσμο και έτσι καταλάβαμε ότι αυτό είναι που έχουμε κι εμείς άλλα 2-3 άτομα που είχαμε παρόμοια συμπτώματα. Και έτσι από εκεί το καταλάβαμε και μάθαμε ότι αυτή είναι η λέξη και έτσι ονομάζεται.
Regarding the story, how we learned in Greece about Usher syndrome, back at the time, apart from me, I knew around two or three more people that they were facing similar issues, vision issues as me while they were deaf. But no one knew Usher syndrome or deafblindness. But a deafblind person at that time went to the UK and visited London, and he was diagnosed there. And he came back to Greece, and he literally.
Ήταν σκέτος σκοφός αυτός που πήγε στην Αγγλία. Απλά
Ah,
ενημερώθηκε σχετικά με αυτό.
So that person that went from Greece to the UK was a deaf person, but he got some awareness about deafblindness in the UK, in London, and when he came back to Greece, he literally brought some leaflets about Usher syndrome. And everybody got excited because now they had a name for this. They had some sort of awareness, some sort of information. What is that they are facing? Kula was could see herself into that leaflet's information because she could see the same sort of symptoms she was experiencing. So that deaf person who came back to Greece from London spread the word in Greece. He visited some organizations and bodies and gave some speeches. So we started being aware about deafblindness and Usher syndrome. This is how we learned and found out about Usher syndrome in Greece.
Από εκεί λοιπόν και μετά εγώ ξεκίνησα να μαθαίνω και να παραδέχομαι ότι δεν είμαι κομπλεξική, δεν είχα κόμπλεξ να το παραδεχτώ αυτό. Μέχρι πριν δεν ήθελα, αλλά μέχρι τότε δεν μιλούσε κανείς γι' αυτό. Μετά όμως το παραδέχτηκα και είπα ότι ναι, εγώ η ίδια, ναι, είμαι συνειδητοποιημένη, ναι, έχω αυτό το σύνδρομο που λέγεται σύνδρομο Usher. Άρχισα να στεναχωριέμαι φυσικά, έκλαψα πολύ. Εντάξει, σκέφτηκα ότι έχω σύνδρομο Usher, τι θα γίνει στο μέλλον, φοβήθηκα ότι θα μειωθεί η όραση πολύ και στο τέλος θα καταλήξω τυφλή. Ο άντρας μου έλεγε δεν το ξέρεις ότι θα γίνει αυτό, μη σκέφτεσαι αρνητικά. Το σημαντικό είναι ότι αυτή τη στιγμή βλέπεις. Όταν έχει φως βλέπεις, δεν χρειάζεται να σκέφτεσαι αρνητικά, δεν χρειάζεται να σκέφτεσαι τι θα γίνει στο μέλλον και εγώ θα σε βοηθάω και όντως με συνοδεύει παντού ο άντρας μου και την αρνητική ψυχολογία που είχα με βοήθησε πάρα πολύ να την αφήσω και να σκέφτομαι θετικά. Και μετά εγώ κοιτώντας τον εαυτό μου είπα ναι, γιατί να σκέφτομαι αρνητικά, δεν χρειάζεται να σκέφτομαι συνέχεια αρνητικά, πρέπει να σκέφτομαι θετικά και αυτό θα με βοηθήσει. Και έτσι, επειδή αυτό που μου άρεσε να κάνω ήταν τα ταξίδια, ήδη μου άρεσαν από πριν πολύ τα ταξίδια.
Good. From that point on, after that diagnosis for Usher syndrome, I started some sort of inner journey to accepting that situation and being less insecure about it. Until then, I didn't want to admit that I'm a deafblind individual, that I have Usher syndrome. I got really upset. I had very strong sad emotions. I cried. I got scared that I'm gonna lose my sight, that I will become a blind person. My husband was trying to support me, He was trying to help me to avoid doing negative thoughts. He was arguing for that now you can see, now you can experience things. And yes, my husband is really helping me. He's my assistant, my navigator. Um, and through through his help, I started managing the whole situation, and I started thinking things in a more positive way. And from that point, until then, I was really enjoying traveling around. And I saw that as an opportunity to travel more.
Και από τότε ξεκίνησα να ταξιδεύω ακόμα περισσότερο, να σκέφτομαι θετικά, άφησα τις αρνητικές σκέψεις πίσω μου και είπα ότι αυτή τη στιγμή, ναι, έχω σύνδρομο Άσερ, αλλά δεν με ενδιαφέρει αυτό, δεν το έχω στο μυαλό μου, δεν νιώθω κάτι γι' αυτό, το αφήνω πίσω μου και λέω ότι έχω στο μυαλό μου τα ταξίδια. Βάζω θετικές σκέψεις στο μυαλό μου, θα πάω στα βουνά, στη φύση. Ναι, υπάρχουν δυσκολίες, σε όλες τις χώρες υπάρχουν δυσκολίες, αλλά θα τα καταφέρω. Δεν είπα ότι είναι εύκολο αυτό φυσικά. Ούτε ο άντρας μου είπε ότι είναι εύκολη. Το να έχεις δύο παθήσεις είναι πολύ πιο δύσκολο από το να έχεις μόνο μία φυσικά. Αλλά θα προσπαθήσουμε ακόμα περισσότερο και θα τα καταφέρουμε. Και θα αντιμετωπίσουμε τις δυσκολίες, θα τις ξεπεράσουμε και θα τα καταφέρουμε. Ήθελε φυσικά πολύ υπομονή, ήθελε πολύ δύναμη, ήθελε πολύ συνειδητοποίηση. Αλλά μέχρι τώρα, 30 χρόνια αυτή η ιστορία, φτάσαμε σε 90 χώρες να έχουμε πάει. Και το αποτέλεσμα είναι ότι η όρασή μου δεν έχει μειωθεί τόσο πολύ. Υπάρχει μια σταθερότητα στην πάθηση. Μέχρι τώρα είναι σταθερά στο ίδιο σημείο. Δεν επιδεινώθηκε δηλαδή η μείωση αυτή της όρασης. Βλέπω καινούργια πράγματα, βλέπω το περιβάλλον, έχω επαφές με ανθρώπους και με αυτόν τον τρόπο εξασκούνται και τα μάτια μου, θεωρώ, και έχουν παραμείνει σε αυτό το υγιές σημείο που είναι σταθερό μέχρι τώρα.
So it was an opportunity for me to travel more. So I left all the negativity, all these negative thoughts aside, and I started thinking that I can do more. I was feeling that I can leave all that behind, in a way accepting it, and then I can start going out, traveling around, going to the mountains, close to the nature, etc., etc. It wasn't easy. It was kind of difficult. It's not easy to travel around under these circumstances. But I was strong enough to feel confident enough that I'm able to do so. So my husband and I, we are a team, so we can do stuff together. We can deal with that together with patience, with some sort of empowerment and some sort of awareness. So the last 30 years, we managed to visit 90, almost 90 countries. And my vision hasn't been really deteriorated all these years. It's kind of permanent. And I am able to see new places, new things, new people. Uh, Probably, I can't be sure about that, but because I was using my eyesight, probably I helped them in a way for the vision to be permanent.
Και έτσι σκέφτομαι πάντα θετικά. Φυσικά είναι σημαντικό πάρα πολύ που έχω δίπλα μου τον άντρα μου και είναι συνοδός μου, με βοηθάει. Αλλά απ' την άλλη, στην καθημερινή μου ζωή εδώ στην Αθήνα, κινούμαι μόνη μου. Κάθε μέρα στη δουλειά μου, δεν είναι μαζί μου συνέχεια και εγώ είμαι μια τεμπέλα. Μόνη μου κάνω τις δουλειές μου, κινούμαι Στο σκοτάδι, όταν έχει απόλυτο σκοτάδι, τότε δυσκολεύομαι πολύ. Όταν έχει όμως φως, μπορώ και τα καταφέρνω μόνη μου στην καθημερινότητά μου. Δεν θέλω να τα έχω όλα έτοιμα στο πιάτο και να με φροντίζουν οι άλλοι. Δεν είμαι τεμπέλα και η αλήθεια αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό να σας το πω και μπορώ να το αποδείξουν και τα ταξίδια μου, όλα αυτά που έχω κάνει. Αλλά ναι, μόνο στο βαθύ σκοτάδι και στα ταξίδια.
I try to think positively all the time. Apparently, my husband is valuable to me. He is my navigator, my assistant. But in Athens, where we live, during daylight, I'm independent. I'm going at work. I'm doing my course. Uh, Generally, I try to become independent. I'm not a lazy person. I'm just facing serious issues during the night because of my night blindness. It's very important for me to say to you that I don't want all the time to be care, to people to be take care of me, but that I am some sort of independent only during the night after the sunset and during when I'm traveling, I need some assistance.
Και επίσης όταν είμαι στο βουνό φυσικά χρειάζομαι βοήθεια που είναι επικίνδυνα όταν δεν υπάρχει εύκολη πρόσβαση στο βουνό.
And also apparently when
Γιατί
I'm
εκεί τίθεται το θέμα ισορροπίας.
when
Όταν είναι δύσκολο το μονοπάτι στο βουνό, είμαι πολύ κουρασμένη και αρχίζω και χάνω την ισορροπία μου, τότε χρειάζομαι βοήθεια. Αλλά αυτό το αποδέχομαι και το συνηθίζω. Ξέρω ότι δεν μπορώ όλα να τα κάνω, υπάρχουν συγκεκριμένες συνθήκες που χρειάζομαι βοήθεια. Αυτό είμαι όμως, έτσι είμαι. Αυτό το αποδέχομαι και προχωράω. Αλλά σκέφτομαι θετικά πάντα. Έλα, Γιάννη.
Of course, when I'm going for hiking, mountain hiking, it's not easy all the time because when someone hikes, you may face uh, vestibular issues, balance issues. Sometimes when I'm hiking and I'm feeling tired, I need some help. And I admit that I can't do everything on my own. This is it. This is how it is. I'm accepting it and I move on. I try to think positively.
Ναι, στο βουνό πρέπει πάντα να έχω συνοδό. Δεν θα πάω ποτέ μόνη μου στο βουνό. Το ξέρω αυτό και θα έχω πάντα εκεί το συνοδό μου.
Uh, yes, when I'm going to the mountain, always need an assistant, a navigator. I never go on my own. I know that. This is the reason I'm always accompanied.
Και το ίδιο και στο σκοτάδι. Στο απόλυτο σκοτάδι.
Same as when I'm going to not very well lit places during the night, etc.
Οπότε από τότε μέχρι τώρα, ξεκίνησα να ταξιδεύω και δεν είναι ότι είμαι καμία πλούσια και ότι έχω πολλά λεφτά και μπορώ να κάνω συνέχεια ταξίδια. Έχω βρει τρόπο να κάνω τα ταξίδια μου οικονομικά. Είναι ανεξάρτητα, δεν πηγαίνουμε με κάποιο πρακτορείο και φροντίζουμε πάντα να οδηγάμε εμείς, να κοιμόμαστε μέσα σε είτε τροχόσπιτο είτε σκηνή που είναι πάνω στο αυτοκίνητο. Και έτσι ψάχνουμε καλά που θα πάμε, ψάχνουμε τα εισιτήριά μας και όλα μαζί προσπαθούμε να τα κρατάμε σε ένα low budget.
And all these years that I'm traveling, I would like to say that I'm not really a wealthy person. We are just trying to find uh, ways to travel in a budget. This is the reason we usually organize everything on our own, that we don't use travel agents, that we prefer to drive rather than taking agencies. We use camper vans. We use cars that a tent can be set on top of them, and we spend a lot of time organizing our traveling in order to minimize the costs of it.
Φανταστείτε αυτή η σκηνή πάνω από το αυτοκίνητο που κοιμόμαστε, για μένα είναι δύσκολη, γιατί όταν πέφτει το σκοτάδι, δεν είναι σαν ένα σπίτι που έχει φώτα κανονικά. Στην αρχή είχα πολύ μεγάλη δυσκολία, είχα άγχος και σκεφτόμουν πώς θα γίνει αυτό με το σκοτάδι μες στη σκηνή. Αλλά ο άντρας με βοήθησε πάρα πολύ, μου είπε θα συνηθίσεις. Του λέω, μα πώς θα συνηθίσω, είναι σκοτάδι, αυτό δεν ταιριάζει καθόλου με αυτό που μπορώ να κάνω. Μου λέει, όχι, όχι, μπορείς να τα καταφέρεις, είμαι σίγουρη για σένα. Και στην αρχή όντως δυσκολεύτηκα, μετά όμως την πρώτη εβδομάδα, δεύτερη εβδομάδα συνήθισα. Και έτσι αυτό με το αυτοκίνητο περίπου 17 χρόνια μέχρι τώρα κοιμόμαστε με αυτόν τον τρόπο μια χαρά.
Um, and Imagine that we are using that car, that a tent can be set on top of it, the last apologies, the last 17 years. This is the way we travel around. And think that I can't see during the night. So for me, in the very beginning, the whole thing, the tent on the car, because of the dusk and the night around, it wasn't easy. I was very anxious. How I'm gonna manage all that? My husband was there. He was supporting me. He was trying to give me the strength to understand the whole situation and go through this. Yes, after 1 or 2 weeks, I get used to that. Since and we spent 17 years doing that, sleeping during traveling in a tent on top of a car.
Και βρήκαμε και τρόπο να επικοινωνούμε και στο σκοτάδι μέσω της απτικής νοηματικής, μου έκανε νοήματα στα χέρια, με έχει στηρίξει πάρα πολύ όλα αυτά τα χρόνια, τον παραδέχομαι γι' αυτό και βρήκε και σε αυτόν τον τρόπο μαζί με το σκοτάδι, βρήκε τρόπο πώς να επικοινωνούμε και γενικά είναι πάρα πολύ φροντιστικός και υποστηρικτικός απέναντί μου, είναι πολύ καλός άνθρωπος και με έχει βοηθήσει, χωρίς αυτό δεν θα μπορούσα να τα έχω καταφέρει όλα αυτά.
And my husband and I developed also a tactile sign language so we can communicate at night. It's our own language, our own code of human communication. He's very supportive, and even during the night, we still communicate. He's an amazing and kind person.
Το μόνο σημαντικό πρόβλημα με το βράδυ είναι η τουαλέτα. Σκέψου να θες το βράδυ να πας τουαλέτα και να πρέπει να κατέβεις τη σκαλίτσα. Ακόμα και τότε όμως εγώ τον ξυπνάω, θα ξυπνήσει, θα έρθει μαζί μου και θα με περιμένει να κατέβουμε από τη σκηνή που είναι πάνω στο αυτοκίνητο με τη σκαλίτσα, να πάμε στην τουαλέτα και να γυρίσουμε να συνεχίσουμε τον ύπνο μας. Σκέψου πόση ώρα, ας πούμε, και ότι τον ξυπνάς μέσα στο βράδυ και έρχεται μαζί σου και πρέπει και γι' αυτό. Πριν από αυτό, του είχα πει ότι θα πάω εγώ μόνη μου, όχι να πάρω οδηγίες. Όχι, μου λέει, θα με ξυπνήσει σε μένα, ρωτάμε από πριν που είναι η τουαλέτα να ξέρουμε και πηγαίνουμε πάντα μαζί. Υπάρχει, μπορείς να βρεις τρόπο για όλα.
So, imagine an example of challenges we faced was going to the toilet, going to the loo at night. So, think of a tent on top of a car. So there is some sort of a ladder to go up and down, and I'm waking him up. So we go together to the designated toilet point where we have parked, and we are coming back together. In the beginning, I wanted to do all that on my own, but he was insisting that we should do it together for safety reasons. And yeah, we are doing that together, even that together. But I mentioned that to show you that we can manage pretty much everything, no
Και
matter what.
τώρα έχω φτάσει στο σημείο που τον ξυπνάω, απλά τον ενημερώνω ότι θα πάω τουαλέτα, να το ξέρει, πηγαίνω μόνη μου και απλά με περιμένει ξύπνιος μέχρι να γυρίσω, να έχει το νου του μη συμβεί κάτι, περιμένει εκεί στην σκηνή και όταν γυρίσω τότε ξανακοιμάται.
Uh, the last, I don't know, recently, in a way, I'm able to go on my own, but I'm just waking him up so he knows that I will be away for a small amount of time. I'm going to the toilet, and then he's there awaiting, and when I'm coming back, we sleep back together.
Όλα αυτά λοιπόν μέχρι τώρα σηματοδοτούν τη ζωή μου, έτσι συνεχίζουμε, τα ταξίδια μας, τα όνειρά μας. Δεν θέλουμε να σταματήσουμε ακόμα σίγουρα. Θέλουμε να το κάνουμε αυτό για πολλά χρόνια ακόμα.
Uh, until today, until that point, we don't want to stop. We want to travel together. We want to dream together for many, many years to come.
Και σε αυτό το βιβλίο λοιπόν που έγραψα με τίτλο «Η ζωή μιας δραστήριας και θαραλέας κοφής», έβαλα τις λέξεις δραστήρια και τη λέξη θαραλέα. Για ποιο λόγο τις έβαλα αυτές τις λέξεις? Γιατί πραγματικά αυτό που θέλουμε είναι να κάνουμε πράγματα, δεν θέλουμε να καθόμαστε. Θέλουμε να έχουμε προκλήσεις, να έχουμε επαφές με καινούριους ανθρώπους, να ξεπερνάμε εμπόδια, να αντιμετωπίζουμε δυσκολίες και θέλουμε να φτάσουμε στην κορυφή. Αυτός είναι ο στόχος μας. Το όνειρό μου είναι αυτό το βιβλίο να στείλει ένα μήνυμα σε όλους τους ανθρώπους που έχουν προβλήματα, που έχουν δυσκολίες, να μην κάθονται απομονωμένοι σε μια αγωνία και μιζεριάζουν για το πρόβλημά τους και λένε εγώ δεν μπορώ να κάνω αυτό, δεν μπορώ να κάνω εκεί, δεν μπορώ να κάνω το άλλο, αλλά να βγουν έξω, να μην κάθονται απομονωμένοι. Αυτό το βιβλίο είναι μια απόδειξη ότι μπορείς να τα καταφέρεις ακόμα και με μια τέτοια διπλή πάθηση, όπως είναι η τυφλοκόφωση. Δεν είναι εύκολο, είναι δύσκολο. Αλλά θέλω να δώσω ένα μήνυμα και ένα παράδειγμα ότι ακόμα και έτσι μπορείς να καταφέρεις τόσα πράγματα όπως αυτές το να πας σε 90 χώρες, ας πούμε. Ενώ φυσικά για τους ακόντες αυτό είναι πολύ πιο εύκολο, αλλά εγώ που δεν ακούω και έχω επιπλέον και το πρόβλημα του συνδρόμου Usher, δηλαδή μια διπλή πάθηση, είναι ασύγκριτα πιο δύσκολο, αλλά και πάλι, ορίστε, εδώ είναι και είναι το παράδειγμα ότι μπορούν και οι άλλοι να το κάνουν. Αυτό το μήνυμα θέλω να στείλω ουσιαστικό γράφοντας αυτό το βιβλίο.
Uh, so the book I wrote the title of it is The Life of an Active and Courageous Deaf Woman. I used the words active and courageous. Why that? Because um, I want to prove to the people that even though we are going through difficult situations, we're going through a lot of challenges, we can manage to reach to the top. We can manage to deal with all these difficulties. My dream is to send a message to everybody, no matter who is these persons are, that they shouldn't be isolated. They shouldn't feel miserable for themselves, that they can find the inner power to go out and achieve whatever they want, whatever they like. The book is a proof that everybody can do everything they want, no matter what, even for deafblind people. Apparently, for people, everything is easier. But if for me that I have a double impairment, deafblindness, even for me, if stuff are possible, then it's possible for everybody. This is the message I want to send.
Ναι, όχι μόνο για τους ανάπηρους, για όλους τους ανθρώπους που λένε δεν μπορώ να κάνω αυτό, δεν μπορώ να κάνω εκείνο, δεν μπορώ να κάνω το άλλο. Ο καθένας έχει τους δικούς του λόγους και τα δικά του προβλήματα. Όλοι να ξέρουν ότι μπορούν και πολλοί βλέπουν τα πράγματα αρνητικά και λένε αποκλείεται αυτό ή κάθονται απομονωμένοι, όχι απαραίτητα έχοντας κάποια αναπηρία. Μπορεί να είναι και στο μυαλό τους όλο αυτό, να αλλάξει το μυαλό τους και να σκέφτονται θετικά. Αυτό θέλω να περάσω. Να αλλάξει η αρνητική σκέψη και η απομόνωση, η αρνητική ψυχολογία να μεταστραφεί σε μια θετική ψυχολογία. Αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό. Είτε είναι ακούντες, είτε είναι ανάπηροι, όλοι είναι ισότιμοι και πρέπει απλά να προσπαθούν να σκέφτονται θετικά. Ο καθένας έχει διαφορετικό τρόπο, όλοι οι άνθρωποι είναι διαφορετικοί, αλλά ό,τι και αν έχουν, αυτό το μήνυμα θέλω να στείλω. Να έχουν θετική σκέψη, να σκέφτονται θετικά και το ίδιο και στο Facebook και τα βιντεάκια και τις φωτογραφίες που ανεβάζω με τα ταξίδια. Όλοι τα βλέπουν και λένε αυτή είναι τυφλοκοφή, έχει κόφωση, έχει και την αναπηρία στα μάτια και παρόλα αυτά μπορεί να τα καταφέρνει, να τα κάνει όλα αυτά. Αυτό το βιβλίο είναι η απόδειξη και το μήνυμα αυτό.
I'm not talking only for disabled people. I'm talking for everybody, able and disabled. I'm talking about everybody that says to themselves, I can do that. I don't have the strength to do it, etc., etc. So everybody can do, no matter their physical or mental state. It's a matter of mental awareness to think and act positively, to transform the negative thoughts and emotions into positive acting and thoughts. Everybody is different. Everybody has their own ways to cope with their lives. And everybody can think positively. When I'm posting stuff online to social media from my travels, and people can't believe that a person who is deafblind can really do these things. How is that possible? Is he able to do that? Yes, I'm able to do that. And the book is the proof.
Hi, Koula. I'm just conscious of time. So, and I imagine members will have some questions. So, could we make this your last comment, please? And we can open it for questions for 5 minutes. Thanks so much.
Ωραία, εγώ αυτά ήθελα να σας πω. Αυτό ήταν το μήνυμα που ήθελα να περάσω και θέλω αυτό το μήνυμα να περάσει σε όλους. Δεν έχω κάτι άλλο να πω, ούτε θέλω να μακρηγορήσω. Χάρηκα πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση αυτή. Ελπίζω πραγματικά αυτό το μήνυμα να διαχυθεί σε όλους και πραγματικά θέλω να δείξω σε όλο τον κόσμο ότι μπορεί να καταφέρει αυτά τα πράγματα και σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Ε,
Μετά, ό,τι ερωτήσεις έχετε, θα σας τις απαντήσω φυσικά.
Uh, this is what I wanted to say. I just wanted to share that message with all of you. I'm really grateful for the invitation today, and I hope that the message I told you can reach everybody, that everybody can do whatever they want. Feel free to ask me anything.
Koula, thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. I really enjoyed how you took us all the way through your life, not only all the traveling you've been doing more recently, but from your birth all the way through and hearing your story. So many echoes to similar themes in other people's lives, but really so fascinating and so powerful, I think, to hear your message, not just for other deafblind people or other people with Usher, but as you said yourself, for all people to achieve what they want to achieve and to live the lives they want to live. So, as always, I do have a couple of questions I'd like to ask, but I'm going to open it up to members first. We have about just 5 minutes or so. So, does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Koula? If you can either just raise your hand on the system, or if you just want to put a question in the chat, then please do so. Do we have any questions? I'm just going to check the chat.
Femke is raising her hand.
Femke, you have a question.
Of course. Yes. Femke here from the Netherlands speaking. Yes, thank you for this amazing story. It's really inspiring to listen to. And it was fun with the translations between the different languages too. I think that always also shows the power of communication. My question for you would be, I really applaud you for taking your own pathway together with your husband. And the message you send out, like anything is possible, is a beautiful message. Are you still meeting people who kind of try to lure you in to this different message? Like, are you still confronting situations where people consciously or unconsciously make you disabled instead of your strong message? And if so, how are you dealing with that?
Όχι, δεν έχω συναντήσει ανθρώπους που μου λένε αρνητικά και μου λένε ότι δεν μπορώ να τα καταφέρω και με τραβάνε προς τα κάτω. Μέχρι τώρα δεν μου έχει πει κάποιος κάτι αρνητικό. Όχι, ποτέ δεν μου έχουν πει κάτι αρνητικό. Μου λένε μπράβο, συνέχισε τα ταξίδια σου, μπορείς να τα καταφέρεις. Αλλά όχι, δεν έχω δεχθεί αρνητικά σχόλια.
Since now I haven't met people that they try to they speak negatively about me and they try to judge me. I haven't heard something negative. Everybody is quite supportive, and they are telling me, "Well done, go on like this," but no negative thinking or thoughts.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Femke. Does anybody, Helen, I can see your hand is up. Helen, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry.
Hi,
My name
Helen.
is Helen from, hi, Peter and everyone. Wonderful presentation from Yanis. My question is, do you offer any training awareness on Usher syndrome? Because I have a family here. She's my friend and she's a parent, and she has 3 children with acquired deafblindness. And apparently, she was telling me the 2 brothers become blind at night, and then they have problems with balancing. So I don't know if we can make a connection. Your story has inspired me. I can try to share also with her. Maybe she can learn something about Usher syndrome. Thanks.
Εγώ ίδια εδώ στην Ελλάδα που είμαι δεν έχω λάβει κάποια ειδική εκπαίδευση. Μόνο μεταξύ μας εμπειρικά η τυφλοκοφή, κάνουμε μια ομάδα, φέτος φτιάξαμε και μια επιτροπή. Εμένα δεν με έχει εκπαιδεύσει κάποιος αυτό. Απλά εμπειρικά βρίσκω λύσεις στα προβλήματα που αντιμετωπίζω. Μόνο αυτό. Αλλά πραγματικά ελπίζω να φτιαχτεί μια ομάδα που να έχει εκπαιδευτικό χαρακτήρα και να μπορέσει να βοηθήσει σε κάτι τέτοιο. Πρέπει να φτιαχτεί κάτι τέτοιο.
Personally, I haven't received any special education for the deafblind people here in Greece. There is a group of deafblind people. There is some sort of a committee, but I haven't trained myself. I'm solving my everyday issues through my own experiences. So I'm finding ways to deal with everything pretty much on my own. I adapt to the issues I'm facing. I really hope that a team, a group, an organization with educational tools will be created here in Greece. It has to be done.
Πρέπει να φτιαχτεί μια τέτοια και μόλις φέτος συστήθηκε η Επιτροπή Τυφλοκοφών στην Ελλάδα για πρώτη φορά. Ενώ στις άλλες ευρωπαϊκές χώρες υπάρχουν ήδη.
Yes, it has to be done. Only this year, a committee for the deafblind people has been created. And in other parts of Europe, it's something that you can find the last many years. Hope that this will be evolved also here.
Thank you, Helen, for the question, and Koula for your response. I'm just looking, we've had a message in the chat from Srikamalan in Canada, who says, thanks for the interesting sharing. And he appreciates the organizers and Koula, of course, as well as the interpreters. Unfortunately, he had to leave now for work, but sends his best wishes from Canada. Do we have any other questions before I perhaps use my position as chair to get the opportunity to ask a question myself before we finish? I'm just checking the chat. I'm going to check whether people have got their hands up. I can see that Amanda Stevens has joined us. Amanda, it's lovely to have you from New Zealand. So Koula, your message really is reaching far and wide across the globe, including with our friends over in New Zealand. So that's excellent. And so I'll come on to my question, Koula, talking about different parts of the globe. I always feel my questions are very unfair and very difficult, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've traveled to more than 90 countries. Which is your favorite and why?
Αν έπρεπε να επιλέξω μία χώρα, θα έλεγα την Ισλανδία. Μου άρεσε πάρα πολύ γιατί εκεί πέρα είναι το κάτι άλλο. Η φύση είναι τόσο ιδιαίτερη, έχει πάρα πολύ γαλήνη, ησυχία, οι άνθρωποι φαίνεται ότι είναι ήρεμοι, είναι καθαρά. Μου άρεσε πάρα πολύ αυτή η χώρα. Μου φάνηκε εντελώς διαφορετική από όλες τις άλλες.
If I had to choose one country, I would choose Iceland. I really liked Iceland. It has an extraordinary landscape and nature. It's a peaceful place, a quiet one, a clean one. People there are really calm. I really enjoyed visiting Iceland. It's a totally different place than other.
Thanks, Koula. I've been lucky enough myself to have visited Ireland, and I would agree with you. It's a really beautiful country.
Προσωπικά μου αρέσει και πάρα πολύ η φύση. Τις πόλεις λίγο τις έχω βαρεθεί, οπότε γι' αυτό το λόγο την επέλεξα κιόλας. Αν έπρεπε να πω για πόλη, εντάξει, είναι άλλη κατηγορία, αλλά η φύση είναι το κάτι διαφορετικό.
Chose Iceland because of its nature. I'm not a big fan of big cities. Yeah, if we were talking about cities, I could choose something else. But to me, priority is always places with landscapes and nature.
Lovely. I am conscious of time. We'll fit in two more questions. I can see two hands up, but if I can ask if we can just make them quite quick questions now so we can finish in time. So Marcela over in Colombia, how are you, Marcela? Do you want to ask us your question? We can't hear you, Marcela.
Can you hear me well?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we're here in Bogota, Colombia. I'm with two of my coworkers. So we really enjoy the webinar. Thanks a lot for you. The presenter, the speaker is just wonderful. Here we work for the National Institute for the Deaf, and I've seen that most of our deaf friends really enjoy traveling. They love traveling, so they spend most of their money traveling. We're learning from them. But talking about deaf-blind people is kind of different. But we have now some guide interpreters, some people trained in order to be with them in natural environments, hiking, just going places. But we have just one question. How can we get your book? We really want to read it. It's wonderful.
A good question, Marcela.
So how can we get it?
Δεν μπορείτε να... Το βιβλίο είναι στα ελληνικά αυτή τη στιγμή γραμμένο, αλλά υπάρχει σαν e-book στην αγγλική γλώσσα και άμα θέλετε μπορείτε στο Facebook με το όνομά μου, Κούλα Σομαράκη, να πατήσετε και να δείτε το link στο οποίο μπορείτε να δείτε το e-book στα αγγλικά.
I'm afraid the book is written in Greek only, but there is an ebook in English, which is available through my personal Facebook profile. If you look for me, Koula Somaraki, you will be able there to find the link to the English version of the ebook.
Thanks a lot.
Μάλλον το έστειλε κάποιος στο...
Great question, Marcella, and I'm delighted to hear, Koula, that the book is available in English. I've put a link, which I think is correct. It might be the wrong connection. It was a Facebook connection to a post you made, but if not, we can search later on Facebook to try and find it. So we've just got a few minutes left. I'm going to hand over to Shankar. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, over in Nepal. Hi, Shankar. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm audible.
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We are also working here in Nepal with people with deafblindness. We National Federation of Deaf Nepal and Deafblind Association Nepal, with two organizations together working for deafblind education, their mobility and employment. So it's a very wonderful presentation, and we also organize two, group treks in Nepal for deafblind people in high Himalaya range until the 3,000-meter altitude, and I'm very glad Ms. Koula also love to travel, and I want to welcome her in Nepal for a trek in high Himalaya range. And just I have one question for everyone. We have lots of deaf people who have progressive vision loss, and we don't have any diagnosis system for Usher syndrome. So I want to know how to diagnose Usher syndrome. So if we know about that, then we can also assessment for those children. Thus, I came back from field. I visited one school, a deaf special school, where I met around 50 children who have born deafness and progressive vision loss. They are, some of them they drop out from schools because teachers also don't know about the deafblindness or how to teach such types of children. So just I'm wondering about that. So how to diagnose Usher syndrome? Please, if you have any idea, please share.
Okay, thank you, Shankar. It's a little bit difficult to hear, so I'll just go over some of what you were saying.
I'm waiting for Yannis.
I was waiting for you.
I'll go over what I caught of it as a native English speaker, because that's really difficult for you guys. So first of all, Shankar, thanks for joining us from Nepal, and also for extending an invitation to Koula to visit Nepal, and of course trekking in the Himalayas. Koula, you mentioned enjoying country and mountains. I imagine you might already have been Nepal. You'll have to tell us if you have been, but it's lovely to hear that you have an invitation to visit. Shankar, I think your question really
hasn't been there yet.
Oh, not yet. So well, you have an invitation now, Koula, so it would be great if you get over to Nepal.
I'll have it in mind.
Great. The question from Shankar, if you could offer some brief thoughts on it, Koula, but I invite all members of the network to perhaps share their thoughts. Perhaps we can put this in our next newsletter, how in your country Usher syndrome is being diagnosed and pathways. I think it might be helpful for colleagues in Nepal to hear not only from you, Koula, but from other people across the globe as to how Usher syndrome is being diagnosed and what those diagnosis pathways are. So you talked a little bit about your challenges in getting a diagnosis, Koula. Are you able to comment on how things are now in Greece in relation to diagnosing Usher syndrome? I hope I've captured your question correctly there, Shankar.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Now what we do is that we go to the doctor, then he examines us, and then he says that we have Usher syndrome. It's not something very specific. It's just the doctor that examines you and says about the syndrome.
I could just add, because I'm also a deafblind individual with Usher syndrome.
Please do, Yanis. Thanks.
Through my own personal experience, it's pretty much as Koula says. You visit an eye specialist and then an ENT doctor, and you may be lucky that they know deafblindness and they know about Usher syndrome, and you may get a diagnosis. But this is not the case for everybody here in Greece, because of there is a lot of ignorance, not only in the general population, but also in the medical community. Things are way better now, but still there is no, let's say, legal recognition for deafblindness into the state benefits system. We are being considered as people with two separate impairments and two separate disabilities rather than having one. This is something we try to change. But from a medical point of view, how to get a diagnosis, most of the case, you go to a doctor, the doctor prescribes, if feasible, genetic testing, so you get for sure the specific type of syndrome you may have, if we're talking about Usher. But because genetic testing is not a cheap one, plus it's not most of the times covered through the, let's say, the national insurance, it means that some people can't afford it, so they don't get official diagnosis. They just have an unofficial one.
Thanks, Yanis. That was really helpful to get some additional information there.
Koula asks if you know where do this happen, this test, in any eye doctors?
Usually there are eye doctors who know genetic labs that they do provide these services. Personally, because I spent a decade in the UK, in London, I was diagnosed there. I did all the genetic testing there and participating in an NHS research trial there. So, but because I came back to Greece and I had to go through the whole process here in Greece as well, the last 4 years, so I have some awareness how things work. But I am aware of doctors who have access to medical lab genetic testing.
Great. Thank you, Yanis. Again, if I can ask members if they have any thoughts about how Usher is being diagnosed in your own countries and your own locations, please do that, share that information, and we can put something in the newsletter. I think that would be of interest to all members. Here in the UK, it's interesting to hear, Yanis, about your experience in the UK and taking part in the trials. We are very similar stories in the past, Koula, to yours, very late diagnosis. And now we're seeing a change where people are diagnosed much earlier, including children being diagnosed very, very young. So I'm just going to put in the chat a link to a charitable organization in the UK called Usher Kids. People might want to have a look at that. It's a charitable organization supporting children with Usher syndrome, but there'll be some information on there around diagnosis, particularly this much earlier diagnosis that we are seeing. And of course, this raises challenges when you're working with children who are not yet deafblind, but we know are going to be deafblind. And this is very challenging and sensitive work that needs to be undertaken to support these children. Well, I'm conscious of time. I'm certainly conscious of time for Koula and our interpreters, who have now gone way beyond the usual time we should let interpreters work without a break. So shame on me for not enacting what I usually tell others, that you should make sure interpreters have a proper break. So forgive me for that. So I'd really like to thank Koula for your presentation.
It's okay, I didn't know how the time passed.
It goes so quick, doesn't it? Well, Koula, I'd really like to thank you for joining us from Greece and to share your story, a very personal story. It's such a rich experience when we hear people's lived experience of deafblindness and the way that in so many creative ways you respond to some of the challenges you face. I'd also like to thank Marina and Yanis, who've done such a wonderful job interpreting for us this afternoon without a break, I will add. So we're super grateful, Yanis and Marina, for your support, enabling us to hear Koula's story. I'd like to also thank our other friends and colleagues in Greece, particularly Georgia and Frozo, for helping us organise the webinar with Koula today. And thanks, of course, always to Deafblind UK for the use of their Zoom, in particular to Andrew Barnes, who works for Deafblind UK and helps set up our Zoom link for us and does the recording and all the IT stuff that I would be hopeless at without Andrew's support. And lastly, of course, thanks to you all for attending the webinar today. The recording will be made available on our YouTube channel in due course, so do look out for that. And I hope to see you all on Wednesday, the 20th of May at 4:30 Central European time for our second webinar. This webinar is called From Signs to Sounds, a new journey with technology and acquired deafblindness, when our friend and colleague Shrutilata Singh from Sense International India.
How can we find it in YouTube, Koula asks?
I'll send a link out with a link to the channel. I can send that to you, Koula. Yeah. So our second webinar, Shrutilata Singh will be talking about her experiences as someone with acquired deafblindness who has relatively recently had a cochlear implant. So we look forward to that on Wednesday, the 20th of May. But for now, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, your evening. Huge thanks again, Koula, Marina, and Yanis, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Take care and thanks so much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching.